it's Carl who is the main character. He's an African guy. He's very bright. He's escaped a war zone. He's crossed Europe. He's applied to the Home Office for right to remain. He gets right to remain, and then he gets his first job, minimum wage, working in a factory. But he's very bright, and he looks at the work they do and the way that they do it, and he puts a suggestion into the company about how they could do things differently. Yeah. The suggestion is excellent, saves loads of money, and the guy who owns the business is white, English, self-made multimillionaire. And he says, which guy made this? I must reward him and encourage other people to do the same. Yeah. Because obviously it makes more money for the boss. Yeah. So he's very keen on that. What happens is they meet. The boss realises he's very bright, and he's looking for fresh, new ideas to give him a competitive advantage in the market. And Carl, the African guy, is very bright and comes up with some very good ideas. And as they then work together, they become friends, and then they start to talk about all sorts of subjects which are politically incorrect but actually impact on everybody's lives. Yeah. And Carl slowly educates Charles, who's the self-made multimillionaire, that it's an unfair system. Mm. And the more Charles learns, the more it disturbs him. Okay. And this scene is scene 78. It says, "There is always a solution, but what?" The wheels of industry keep turning, occupying the working hours of both men. But being a man who is used to answers, not indecision, Charles is uncharacteristically disorientated, a feeling that is as unwelcome as it is unfamiliar. He suggests to Carl an evening meal, away from the office, in a swanky restaurant. Charles will pay, of course. Carl knows this is not to discuss routine matters, and wonders if he has said too much and is about to be fired. He evaluates his options and concludes that the best way he can discharge his responsibilities for those he left behind in Africa is to search for the truth wherever it may lie, so that retreat is not possible, whatever the personal cost. Entering the restaurant, piped background music plays "Money, Money, Money" by ABBA, with the words "In a Rich Man's World" drifting across the room as if requested for the occasion. Seated in a corner, Charles is as sharp-suited and dapper as always, but today his unusual gloss looks scuffed and his manner pensive. This is going to be difficult. After the customary civilities, the elephant in the room makes its presence known. Charles broaches the inevitable subject. "I find a lot of your ideas very disturbing. I can't see that there is a solution." "There's always a solution," replies Carl, "but not necessarily the one you want." "Well, what solution can you suggest?" "Why are you a very successful businessman?" Pausing for reflection, Charles offers an unhurried response. "Well, let me see. I understand how business works. I can recognize opportunities that others can't, and I know what needs to be done to satisfy a market and make a profit." Carl progresses his line of inquiry. "And where is the biggest opportunity in the world?" Charles contemplates further. Let me see. Possibly China? Carl delivers the answer with assured conviction. "Africa." Charles' jaw visibly drops. "Africa? Please! Which millennia are you talking about?" "Your instant dismissal confirms why it is overlooked, and therefore an opportunity. Here are a few facts. Point 1. China has a population of 1.4 billion and rising by 7 million a year. Africa's population is 1.3 billion and rising by over 30 million a year. Before 2025, the population of Africa will be higher than that of China. That is a vast pool of underutilized labor. Point 2. The average wage in the industrialized China is 10 times higher than the average in Africa, and China's costs are rising rapidly. The challenge is to make Africa productive, and the unit costs will be lower. Point 3. Africa has vast quantities of many of the raw materials that the world cannot do without. Point 4. Many of these raw materials are extracted from Africa and transported often 10 to 15,000 kilometers to China for processing, and the finished product is transported 10 to 15,000 kilometers to the biggest markets in the world, Europe and America. Africa is nearer Europe, North America, South America, and the Middle East than China. The carbon footprint and impact on global warming would be dramatically reduced if finished goods were manufactured close to where the resources are mined and supplied directly to the markets they serve. Africa has the materials, the location, and the people. Why is it not the manufacturing centre of the world? Charles stares at the other man in astonishment. This is a shot too far, and he dismisses the idea out of hand. For the very reason you are here, you know better than I the conflicts raging over many parts of Africa. It is the military forces that keep resources flowing that produce the income for many of these countries, and the technical know-how, capital and markets in the West that create those incomes. As you have said, Africa has massively underdeveloped infrastructure for processing materials into finished products, a massively untrained population required for sophisticated industrial processes, never mind the huge political instability. Carl interjects, Point 5. You have articulated the problems, and overcoming them is the opportunity. What is the alternative? If the West pays the dictators and the dictators suppress the population, then you'll have people like me fleeing to Europe for generations. Remember, white people are only 16% of the world's population and diminishing every year. You'd better get used to Africans, because in less than 100 years, some forecasts predict that 40% of the world's population, which is more than the present population, will be African, which is more than the present population of China, India and Europe put together. And Africans will outnumber white people by 3 to 1. The present is not sustainable, and the West will improve their own future security if they embrace change. And wouldn't the many Western countries prefer to deal with 53 independent African countries than a single communist ideological opponent? If Africa sides with China, where will that leave Europe? Very vulnerable indeed. Europeans will still need the materials, and China will try and close off the supply of vital raw materials to the West and only supply finished products at prices they determine. Charles retorts, the Chinese are already in Africa. Dismissing Charles's point, Carl explains why. The Chinese are not very popular in Africa, and with a humble, constructive approach, Europeans would find that many Africans would prefer to deal with Europe than China. But many things are changing, including China, and Europe will not have this opportunity forever. The actions of the West are destroying the philosophical foundations on which their society is built, unleashing forces that they may not understand, will not be able to control, will move in unpredictable ways and potentially destroy democracy. The exploitation, abuse and suffering in Africa will maintain instability, and the outcomes may be very much the disadvantage of Europe. The reality is that in the long term, to maintain its advantages, Europe needs Africa more than Africa needs Europe. Charles spots in, Point 6. You've already pointed out that Africa's been badly mistreated by Europe for 600 years. Wouldn't they see this as backdoor recolonisation by economic means? Carl refused this idea immediately. Africa is already economically colonised right now. That's the problem. There are more economic slaves in Africa today than at any point in its entire history, and the numbers are rising. Don't think of the present human divides. Think about the fundamentals. Breaking down the barriers will open the doors to opportunities that cannot be imagined yet. In essence, nothing has changed from when the first Europeans started to explore Africa 600 years ago. Africa is a huge continent with enormous natural resources, some of which could support life in a sustainable way. Europe has the same need for resources that drove them to investigate Africa in the first place. If Europe continues its ruinous exploitation of Africa and tolerates an ever-rising level of suffering, how can this possibly end well for anybody? As a businessman, you've already acknowledged that you have the skills to recognise the problems and find the right people who can make this work. That is a noble contribution of estimable value and deserves your attention. This is possible if the goals are agreed and it can be demonstrated to advantage Africa. Think of Europe's strengths. Unlike China, Europe has 600 years of relations with Africa and now forms part of African culture. Millions have been brought up as Christians, speaking many European languages, with an education system modelled on European institutions. Many white people live in Africa and many Africans live in Europe. This is not true of China. The frown on Charles's face cannot conceal the struggle he has grappling with this concept. That requires a huge mental shift for everyone, incorporating many dangers. True, don't be fooled by the present apparent instability. The West is burning opportunity. Europe needs a complete rethink, not based on historical prejudices, religion, or short-term self-interest, but on the shared humanity, working with partners for a common purpose. What would a marriage be like if neither partner ever did anything for the other, unless that specific action benefited themselves? A very poor marriage indeed. Partners do things for each other because it benefits the partner and strengthens the partnership. They know their benefit will come in the future when they need help. As sociable creatures, humans gain enormous satisfaction by working together with others on common tasks. This is not a marriage for life. This is a marriage for many lifetimes. Europe needs therapy to acknowledge the problems, articulate the pain so that both parties can understand and take responsibility and work on solutions. A bit like Jeremy Kyle and Graham. Chuckling, Charles throws his head back. Jeremy Kyle, you've been watching too much UK TV. And even he's been banned now. Not deflected, Kyle resumes. I think Jeremy Kyle would do a fine job. Europe needs to come to terms with its past before it can move forward. Charles is still unconvinced. The more you articulate the advantages that the West enjoys today, the greater the sacrifice you are asking the advantage to voluntarily give up. Why would they agree to disadvantage themselves? Carl replies, yes, I accept the point. As we say in Africa, you cannot expect a man to cut the branch he's sitting on, for which I have two answers. One, the risks are already there. Avoiding them is not a solution. Doing nothing will make failure more certain. And two, George Floyd was only one man and a sub-issue compared with the hundreds of millions exploited throughout the world today. But America is a symbol of the principles of freedom on which the West was built and the East observed. Africa is an opportunity to validate the West's beliefs, put them into practice, make humanity stronger, and learn to live in harmony with our environment. It is vital that man understands our place in the universe without enlisting gods to resolve earthly power struggles. Man has become so interdependent on the flow of goods and services that our survival now depends on others outside of like-minded friends, social class, country, or even continent. There's never been a greater need for shared values and tolerance of differences. These challenges can only be resolved through communication. The alternative is isolation, which only makes us weaker. The growing world population will not survive on narrow belief systems. Conflict and self-destruction will eventually become inevitable. Shaking his head, Charles articulates his fears. What you're suggesting would entail huge risks. Taking action is less risky than the dangers faced by the first European adventurers who set off around the world in small wooden boats with sails and no map. The empires of Europe were built on that spirit, and as a businessman you have great skill in recognizing opportunities and finding solutions. Ignoring these issues is not an option. Charles asserts an unqualified truth dear to his art. I've made my money by avoiding fatal mistakes, and I plan to continue doing so. I've never seen myself as an economic martyr. Confirming the challenge, Carl replies, it is believable that you will not explore these economic opportunities, but it's not believable that you could not find any. You have to decide, are you a businessman creating wealth or a parasite living off the efforts and misfortune of others? I'm an entrepreneur and wealth creator, Charles protests. You are, but you operate in a parasitic system. and take a disproportionate share of the wealth created by being close to those that make the rules and run the system. Charles fails to see how he can change the system. But many of these issues are not within the control of business or the business community. It would need governments, European and Africans, to change their attitudes. Then that is your opportunity. Massive inequality of wealth is a major driver of these destructive forces, and its distribution is something that the business community can do something about. But I agree with you, attitudes have to change dramatically, and the Western public have to know the facts. Maybe my book, Prisoners of Beliefs, could help to open people's minds to the possibilities. Almost taunting, Charles replies, "Well, if you believe that, you'd better write it. That's your challenge." "If I wrote it, would you buy a copy?" "Certainly." "If you bought it, would you read it?" "Probably." "And if you read it, would you do anything about it?" "I don't know," Charles replies honestly. Carl says rather pointedly, "Then that's your challenge." And that's the end of that scene. I don't know how that comes across.
Wow, another powerful scene. I like that one.
I didn't know if it was too long-winded, but you have to arm people with facts for them to understand.
Yeah.
And you've got to then go through quite a lot. I mean, all those things are factual. And you can say, yes, but there are other facts and there are other interpretations. Absolutely fine. But then when you're looking at the destruction of the world and therefore humans as well as all the other creatures, that is factually based and visible to anybody who looks.
Yeah.
And the only way you can ignore it is just close your eyes and pretend it's not a problem.
100%. And again, how can people get your book? How can people go about finding out more about this story?
Well, I am still planning. It's almost finished. What's happened in Ukraine has added a few things because I've written about them in the past. I've written about Putin 3 years ago in the story. But now the evidence is becoming unmissable. I'm trying to finish the book within the next 10 days.
Okay.
And at that point, it will then be published. It will certainly be on Amazon. I'm trying to get it into various bookshops. If the supermarkets would take it up, I'd be delighted. Whether, without a publisher, etc., whether a sole writer with no reputation or history can get into a supermarket, I have no idea. I think it's pretty tough. One thing I thought of doing is giving them some free books and say, look, stick those in and see how they go, and then you can buy some more if they sell.
Yeah.
Techniques like that, as long as what I want people to do is to read it, and the more people who read it, hopefully it gives them food for thought.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, what would you like to say to the people that are listening? What would you like them to take away from the book?
I'd like them to look at their own lives and to see, are their beliefs actually enhancing their lives and resolving problems in their life now, or are they limiting their vision so that actually they're perpetuating things which are not working anyway? And there are loads of examples of that. I mean, just one off the cuff. If you sort of read the Bible, the Jews escaped from Egypt as slaves.
Yeah.
And you look at life now, and they still are massively disliked in many parts of the world. Now, I would make a point if I was discussing this. There is a difference between Israel, the country, and Jews as a religious group. And whereas I have sympathy for the way Jews have been treated over centuries, I would disagree with the way that they treat Palestinians, for example, and I think there are some serious issues there. So I think it doesn't matter whether you're Christian, Muslim, atheist, or whatever. I think you can look at your own beliefs and try and learn from the evidence that's in front of you in the world we all live in. And if you look at the evidence, it then challenges some of those beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of every belief.
100%. And of course, I just wanted to say thank you again for your time and speaking to us. It really is powerful stories that you're bringing to the table.
To me, it's very important, and that's why it's better to get it right than to rush for a deadline.
Yeah.
I want, if people, if it has more impact because you have worked on it as best you can, and you get to the point where you think, I can't really improve on that, maybe other people could, but at that point, you've done enough. There are bits in there that still need to be rewritten, not drastically, tidied up, and a little bits of information that I would like to add. Apart from that, the story's actually finished.
That's great. That's great to hear. And of course, when it's finished, it would be great to have a copy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can have a signed copy by the author.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. And again, any final words, final thoughts before we go you want to say to the listeners out there?
I hope that people have had the stamina to listen through the scenes that I've quoted. There are many other scenes and many different situations. It covers all the prejudices that people have, but also it's a story of hope, which is why every character has a challenge at the end of the story. And I hope anybody who reads it reflects and then decides whether there are challenges in their own life that they need to be addressing. Speaking personally, I think differently because of the research I've done and the things I've learned.
Yeah.
And whereas I was a Western industrial accountant all my life, and you get into a niche and you think you're okay, I've been amazed at how ignorant I am about many subjects. And by researching them, you then come up with information which challenges your ideas, and in some cases you change your ideas, and in the process you become more confident. I'm a lot more confident now about talking about things that I would never have talked about before, and the reason is because I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And I therefore rely on what I've been told, my prejudices or whatever. And in fact, that's absolutely inappropriate. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time. And I hope I've got lots of other things which I'd like to add in different areas, and they are challenging.
Yeah.
I would if I look at the people I know.
Yeah.
I say I'm white, English, old, etc. As the family, I would say most of the white people I know are fairly ignorant about many of the important issues, and as soon as you mention things, it might be religion or all sorts of things, they instantly become defensive, and then they respond in a parrot fashion according to the belief system which they've just accepted.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily understand the basis on which those judgments have been informed, or the historical basis.
Yeah.
And I've got lots of things to say about religions, and it's not to attack religion. It's to say it's not to say whether God exists or not. That's unprovable and can't be disproved. It's to say what is the impact of religion in today's society that you can see all around you now. And you've only got to look at lots of the issues, and many of them are religious based, and they are literally worldly power struggles. Then they're not necessarily a God of love, because people do the most horrific things in the name of their God.
Yeah.
And a good example of that at the moment is Putin, and the Orthodox Catholic Church in Russia is supporting Putin and everything he's doing.
Yeah.
Even though the evidence is that actually these are horrific crimes.
Yeah.
That's one example, but there are, if you look, there are hundreds.
100%.
And that's why it impacts on all of us.
Yeah, definitely. Once again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. I really enjoyed it.
No problem. Anytime.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes, people, please do go out there, go and support Richard Rowe when his book is released. A definite one to be reading, and with some very powerful stories.